Good afternoon, I'm Stanley Heller. I'm Administrator of Promoting Enduring Peace, and I'm very happy to start this press conference to talk about the Dorothy Day Award, which we are presenting for the first time here in Connecticut, and we're going to award it this year to Mahmoud Khalil. And what I'll do is explain to the media here that we'll have three speakers: Martha Hennessy of the New York Catholic Worker, Mark Colville of Amistad Catholic Worker, and Shelly Altman of Jewish Voice for Peace New Haven. So they'll be speaking soon. Now, Promoting Enduring Peace has been around for near 70 years. We're best known for our Gandhi Peace Award. Some of the recipients of note: Eleanor Roosevelt was the first, Cesar Chavez, Ralph Nader, and also Dorothy Day. That award is kind of for a lifetime achievement in peace or environment. And for years we've been talking about having another award for people who might be a political prisoner, or in grave danger, or a young person who has done something very important. And in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, that's 1,000. All three categories are taken there, are filled. So he is a Palestinian. He was born of refugee parents in Syria. In 2012, I believe, when the Arab Spring, as they sometimes call it, came to Syria, he was a participant. I think he went to some of the rallies. At any rate, his family decided to flee, and so they left Syria with tens and hundreds of thousands of others. And he came to the U.S. to go to Columbia University, and that's quite an achievement. Thank you very much. Quite an achievement for several reasons. One is that it's very hard to get into Columbia University. It's an elite institution, but probably it was a lot harder to pass the checks to get into the U.S. for refugees. 8 different security institutions have to approve, and so he did get this approval. October 7th comes, what they call the Hamas attack, a military attack, and also accompanied by atrocities. And then October 8th, the incredible and monstrous Israeli government response that has continued to this date. Something that, very briefly, the International Court of Justice has said it is quite probably a genocide, and that they have ordered Israel to take various measures to make sure that the various aspects of genocide do not happen. Israel, far from obeying this, continue their awful assault on Palestinians, and neither the elderly, women, or children have been spared. So, as the months went by, there was protest, and there were protests at Columbia University and followed by other universities. It spread all over, and Mahmoud Khalil took part in this. He did it openly. He didn't wear a mask, as some did. He was a graduate student. He then was widely respected as a speaker, and then he helped mediate things with the university. There was various things that the students did. They pitched tents on a grassy lawn. At one point, they occupied a building. They called it Hind Hall in honor of a little girl who was murdered in January of 2024 while she was in touch with the Palestinian Red Crescent who tried to save her. Instead, the Red Crescent ambulance officials were killed, and she herself lost her life. And then they named that hall for her. At any rate, this is very significant, amazing things that he did. And then we have Trump coming to power and his vow to quiet the campuses, and he was going to do this with expelling people whom he claimed were Hamas supporters and anti-Semites. And Khalil was arrested. Now, not only is there no evidence given, even to the immigration judge, of any material support for Hamas or any anti-Semitism on his part, like speeches with anti-Semitic things being said. None of that evidence was given. There's also the fact that the hypocrisy of the Trump administration to even talk about itself as being an institution that would defend Jews, given its record in its last 4 years in office and the things that it's been saying and doing in the years since. There was an excellent article. We're a block away from Yale University, and Timothy Snyder, one of their most prominent professors, did a piece just 2 days ago, which he entitled "Fomenting Anti-Semitism," and he sees the Trump administration as being deliberately involved in doing that and in using the anti-Semitism issue for its gain. And he has, if I may, he talks about the instigators, the target, the history, the provocation, and the conspiracy theory. And for instigators, he talks about the two of the most important people in it: Trump himself, meeting a couple of years ago with raging anti-Semites, Ye, and that other fellow who laughs at the Holocaust, having dinner with them. And then his number two, as some people call it, Elon Musk, who at the celebration of the inauguration does arm thrusts that are widely seen as copying that done by Nazis during their heyday. The target being the universities that the administration wants to put under its control, doesn't want any protest, and they're using the issue, their crocodile tears of protecting Jews as the way they're going to do this. The history, he says, when they burn books, when they put the universities under control, it's never done for the benefit of Jews, and Jews never benefit from these actions. And then the provocation, he again, Timothy Snyder says, the sweeping of people off the streets, very often Muslims, certainly is going to stir up religious bigotry, perhaps on all sides. And this is the provocation of the administration, certainly something not going to help Jews. And finally, he talks about the conspiracy theory, the whole business that so much is involved with supposedly protecting Jews. It allows the conspiracy theory to grow that Jews are in charge, that Jews are behind all this. And so, all in all, Snyder sees this as fomenting anti-Semitism. And certainly we see anti-Semitism, going on. Back in the first administration, we had the words of Jews will not replace us, said by at Charlottesville, and then the worst massacre of Jews in American history in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And now we see more aspects. We're told a white supremacist just yesterday, or the day before, trying to firebomb and perhaps assassinate the governor of Pennsylvania. So anti-Semitism is certainly terrible and needs to be denounced, but arresting someone doing very noble work in protesting a genocide is the absolute worst way to do this. So well, one thing I have left out is why Dorothy Day. We established this new Dorothy Day Award. She was a journalist, a reformer in the Catholic Church, set up the Catholic worker movement, and was herself arrested many times in her actions. So we at Promoting in Peace admire her, and in fact in 1975 gave her the Gandhi Peace Award. So I am proud now to introduce the granddaughter of Dorothy Day, Martha Hennessy, who's going to talk about Dorothy Day and the work that the Catholic worker movement does in New York and other places, and perhaps some reflections about Mahmoud Khalil.
Well, thank you so much, Stan. This is the first that I've heard of the Dorothy Day Award with your organization, so much appreciated. Dorothy is in the process of canonization of sainthood with the Catholic Church, and the Dorothy Day Guild has just recently put together a Dorothy Day Award. So I guess we're going to be hearing more and more of this kind of thing with Dorothy. So yes, she started the Catholic Worker in 1933. It started with a newspaper being handed out in Union Square, and it was a paper for the people of the street, for the unemployed workers, the displaced farmers. The Great Depression gave birth to this movement, this Catholic worker movement. And Dorothy kept her voice alive for at least 40 years, protesting war, protesting capitalism. She was instructed by a French peasant by the name of Peter Morin, whose ideals were to bring forth Catholic social teachings and take care of the most vulnerable among us, and to help create a new world within the shell of the old. Those are Peter's words. And so Dorothy, I knew her until I was 25, and she certainly had a large impact on my family and the community that she founded. And to this day, we're still feeling the repercussions of her life and her work. Once you've known Dorothy Day, you just spend the rest of your life trying to understand what that meant and what hit you. And those are the words of my sister Kate. So Dorothy was one who believed in pacifism. She believed in poverty. She believed in living in precarity. That brings us closer to God. And she also believed in personalism, something she learned about the French philosophers. And Jesus, being a personalist, inviting the fishermen to come join him. So these are the things that she practiced in her lifetime. And I learned this from my mother as well, is compassionate acceptance. We are one of another, no matter what ethnic or religious background, the mystical body. And we also spend our time in our houses of hospitality now practicing the works of mercy, of feeding the hungry, clothing the naked. The Sermon on the Mount is our manifesto. So Dorothy is a very powerful figure to develop an award for. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much for bringing that out. And I just want to quote a little bit from Marco Rubio, a Catholic. Part of the very sparse evidence that was produced against Mahmoud Khalil included this term. There's a problem with him potentially having serious adverse foreign policy consequences. Freedom of speech, speaking out against mass murder, freedom of assembly on our U.S. campuses. All of this is being challenged by the current administration. And I myself am a convicted felon for protesting nuclear weapons, so I've had my taste of the judicial system, the courts, the prison. I was at Danbury Prison for 5 months. And, you know, we use the law in a way that ends up sacrificing justice. And this is what we're observing right now with this particular case. And this is a demonstration of public dishonesty, of arresting him, taking him, snatching him from his wife who's expecting a child. And now when we hear from Mahmoud, one of the very first things he experiences is the pain and the suffering of other prisoners. And he gives voice to that immediately. This is the kind of person he is. He is what I would call a servant of God. He is suffering personally for what he has done in his work as a negotiator, and blessed are the peacemakers. And he has a wife who is expecting a child, and this is such a travesty, such a horrible human travesty that we're witnessing. And of course, he is, giving us an example of how we are to conduct ourselves. He is representing our families, our communities, in the work that he has done. And his name was simply thrown out to this administration. It's not that they knew who this person was or what he was doing, but we do have something called the Esther Project, which is identifying students who are protesting genocide. So, as we speak today, the Palestinians are being driven out of the Jordan Valley. We're hearing stories of sheep being starved, so that, I'm a farmer too in Vermont, we have sheep. So these cattle populations are being brought in while the sheep are being displaced. My mind goes to the land and to the people when I observe what's happening with the erasure of Palestine. And so Mahmoud Khalil, he is suffering, but he's also bringing us hope. He's bringing us so much hope. And from what I can tell, anyone who is killing is removing themselves further from God. And I just want to end with this reading from Isaiah. Mahmoud is a devout Muslim. I feel that Dorothy, in her lifetime, worked very hard to be ecumenical. And I want to pull from some of these Hebrew words. But I do feel that his faith and his people's faith are helping them. They're being martyred. They're dying every day. And what this points out to us is that we're in a horrible moral dilemma and deplorable situation now in terms of how we're responding to what's happening in Gaza. But I want to end with the words of the prophet Isaiah. It was today's readings, and I felt that it applied to him beautifully. And this is God speaking. This is Allah speaking. I have grasped you by the hand. I formed you and set you as a covenant of the people, a light for the nations, to open the eyes of the blind, to to bring out prisoners from confinement, and from the dungeon those who live in darkness. And so what happens to Mahmoud will be happening to all of us. We're all in this together, and we are in a time of grave darkness. And I pray for him and his wife and his unborn child and his family every day that he will be released soon. Thank you.
Now I'm happy to introduce Mark Colville of New Haven, where we're actually filming this. And Mark's a longtime activist with the Amistad Catholic worker movement, and he's done great work among the unhoused and in protesting nuclear weapons and many other situations. So we're very happy to have him speak for a while.
Well, thank you, Stan. It's a privilege to be here to speak about Dorothy Day and the inspiration behind this award, and of course also to honor the sacrifice and the witness of Mr. Mahmoud Khalil. I just wanted to say a few words from from a local perspective here. We started a Catholic worker house here in New Haven back in 1994, very much inspired by the life and witness and writings of Dorothy Day, the principles around which we're trying to live, and which of course Dorothy and Peter Morin founded this movement, have to do with nonviolence, voluntary poverty, pooling of resources, and most of all being engaged in a neighborhood in such a way that we're working for social change, and particularly we're working on trying to create safe and nonviolent spaces for those who have been abandoned by the system and by law and policy here in New Haven. And through the course of this work, we've come to recognize in the struggle for liberation that's going on in Palestine and the struggle against genocide, we've come to see the same kind of roots of oppression, as similar roots as to those that are kind of promoting the criminalization of homelessness in our own community. And to put that in a nutshell, essentially the kind of oppression that we're dealing with is the denial of personhood as a means to the denial of land or place or neighborhood, or even the right to exist. We talk, we hear a lot about in the struggle for, or in the condemnation of the Palestinian people. We often hear this term raised. Do you recognize the right of Israel to exist? I think Dorothy Day would, if she was here today, she would very much want to say that people have the right to exist, and until we have consensus that everybody has the right to exist, has the right to land and space and place, that she would stand in resistance to any system that would deny that. I came back from a delegation in Palestine back in early September. I spent about 10 days trying to accompany the oppressed communities there, and again recognizing there the same kind of oppression that we see in our own neighborhoods here. About 10 years ago, we here in New Haven, we made a public call to the mayor and the city government to designate one or more parcels of land on which people would have a human right to, when they're not provided with adequate housing by the state, would have a right to create their own home. And so we have a lot of people that are sleeping in tents in this city, and it's been criminalized for decades now. And so we're engaged in trying to turn that around. And the reason I mention it is because in the past year, actually about a year ago now, we witnessed a great movement on the campuses of our universities here in Connecticut, and particularly here in New Haven, where people in solidarity with Palestine set up encampments on the college campuses. Those were brutally disbanded by the police, again, right around this time last year in the spring. And the students here who, again, very courageously came out and tried to stand with those encampments have been themselves criminalized. And many of them have been intimidated by the response from the system, and so we're trying to stand against that. We very much recognize Mr. Khalil as somebody whose life and whose witness and whose current plight needs to be raised up and shown to the public. You know, his experience is a reflection on the state of this country right now. And again, I think that Dorothy Day is very much in solidarity with Mr. Khalil and with the movement for Palestinian liberation. And again, we're trying to, as part of the Catholic worker movement, we're trying to intersect or recognize the intersection of these movements, both locally and globally. And so there's a very powerful, potential here for, the kinds of oppressions that local communities are experiencing all around the world need to be linked up in very concrete ways. And again, I just want to lift up Mahmoud Khalil as somebody who has paid a personal price for that. We're all very much suffering with him and his family as they try to get reunified. So I very much want to say thank you to Promoting Enduring Peace for raising up Mr. Khalil by awarding him this award. And I certainly hope that in the very near future that we can present it to him personally. And so thanks, and I raise up a universal prayer for Mahmoud Khalil and his family.
Thank you, Mark. Our final speaker will be Shelly Altman from Jewish Voice for Peace New Haven. JVP is part of a national organization that has been doing great work, and among other things shows the lie that Palestinian freedom means anti-Semitism. This group and others are Jewish groups are involved in supporting human rights for Palestinians. So we'll call on Shelly Altman.
Thank you, Stan. Good afternoon, everybody. When I spoke at the hands-off rally on the New Haven Green, last Saturday, my first words were, hands off the mouths of students who cry out for an end to the genocide in Gaza. I followed with hands off punishment of students by suspension, expulsion, disappearance, and deportation. Mahmoud Khalil refused to be silenced, and we must be loud and clear in our support of him and in the fight to free him. While speaking to CNN last spring, Mahmoud noted, as a Palestinian student, I believe that the liberation of the Palestinian people and the Jewish people are intertwined and go hand by hand, and you cannot achieve one without the other. Mahmoud echoes the core value of Jewish Voice for Peace, that of collective liberation. We are not free until all are free. This month, Mahmoud wrote in a letter from prison, students have long been at the forefront of change, leading the charge against the Vietnam War, standing on the front lines of the civil rights movement, and driving the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. Today, too, even if the public has yet to fully grasp it, it is the students who steer us toward truth and justice. In the immigration court, which refused to release him, he said, quote, I just hope that the urgency that you deemed fit for me are afforded to the hundreds of others who have been here without hearing for months. Mahmoud continues, I have always believed that my duty is not only to liberate myself from the oppressor, but also to liberate my oppressors from their hatred and fear. In profiling Mahmoud, The Guardian quoted many who know him. Mariam Alwan, a fellow organizer, says, Khalil is not some faceless protester. He is one of the kindest and bravest people I've ever met. Former British diplomat and policy advisor Andrew Waller says, Mahmoud is an extremely kind and conscientious person, and he was loved by his colleagues at the Syria office. Historian Zachary Foster said he was one of the kindest people he had ever met, generous with his time, open-minded and thoughtful. We keep hearing that word, kindest people I've ever met, kindest person I've ever met. I'd like to say a few words about the weaponization of anti-Semitism. Jewish journalist Emily Tamkin writes in the Jewish publication The Forward, and I quote, Passover teaches us why Jews should stand with Mahmoud Khalil. When we sit down to read the Haggadah during the first Seder on Saturday night, we will be discussing the history of Jews, the story of Jews' refusal to be used in a tyrant's narrative. The story of Passover is the story of our community's rejection of the role assigned to it by an authoritarian, and of their courage to imagine something different and better. I will read that story and think about how my government is trying to deport Khalil for his beliefs in the name of the Jews. Continuing, I will read the story of liberation and think about how Khalil should be free, should have never been imprisoned in the first place, and I will think how crucial it is that American Jews again find a way to reject our role in the story spun by a would-be tyrant and stand up for something better. I'd like to conclude with thoughts on anti-Semitism, once again from historian Timothy Snyder, who Stan referenced earlier. Dr. Snyder explains in a podcast this week that all the evidence is that the administration is seeking not to combat anti-Semitism, but to foment it. And paraphrasing Dr. Snyder, it is illogical, perverse, and destructive to go after universities because of anti-Semitism, forcing them to abase themselves over and over and over again to prove that they are not anti-Semitic. This is not favorable to Jews. If we allow the government to claim it is fighting anti-Semitism, when in fact it is fomenting it, we lose the concept, the word, the phenomenon, if we allow it to become just a stick by which people, including anti-Semites themselves, beat other people, just one more bureaucratic tool, then it can't be used for the thing it is meant to be used for, which is to describe a horrifying problem in the real world. I thank Promoting Enduring Peace for honoring Mahmoud Khalil with the first Dorothy Day Award. Thank you.
So there's been, you said you made some efforts to reach Khalil, his lawyers, his family. No luck so far?
Not yet, no.
But obviously you'll continue your efforts.
Of course. You know, I don't think we mentioned that there's $1,000 prize in the whole thing, but there is.
And so you have to find someone to take it,
Yes,
to accept it.
we will have to do that.
Did you reach out directly to I guess who runs the prison in Louisiana? That's a federal prison?
Yeah, no, we have not.
You were going through his lawyers.
Or his family.
His family.
It didn't occur to us to try
Right.
to contact.
So at this point, they don't know that this award has been given. At this point,
I guess they don't.
The prison is actually not a federal prison, it's a private prison, which the federal government contracts out.
Right. Does anybody know anything about the condition in the prison? Has anybody been in touch with anybody else? And who referred to, there was a letter from him that was published, so he's able to communicate.
I referred to that letter. That letter was read after he hadn't been in communication with his attorneys or his wife for a while back after he was first detained. But eventually he was on the phone with them and dictated that letter to them on the phone.
When does it dates from when, more or less?
Oh, I have to think it was in late March.
March. So how long has he been in prison?
Since March 8th.
March 8th, and here we are, April, more than a month. So, to your knowledge, is there any activity going on down there, picketing, demonstrations, or anything going on that PEP will be participating in? So what's the next step, I guess, from your perspective?
Well, it would be to contact the family
Okay.
and to hope they will accept this award and the money and
Okay.
then move on from there. I haven't heard anything about protests in Louisiana, but certainly his name is world famous at this
Right.
point.
Does so is there anything happening at Columbia now in connection with him? Is there an ongoing something or other outside of the campus, because he is?
Last week, a group of mostly Jewish students chained themselves to one of the gates at Columbia in protest of his disappearance and detention.
Specifically in protest of Colville?
Yeah.
And what they were arrested, I assume.
Yeah, they were arrested. I'm not sure what the disposition of them has been since then.
Were those JVP people? To your knowledge?
They were unaffiliated students, but they were mostly Jewish. It was not coordinated by JVP. No.
I think it's kind of essential to understand that that what happened to Mahmoud Khalil was an abduction. It was essentially a kidnapping. Which, and I say that because I mentioned that I had been about 8 months ago now, I was on a delegation in Palestine.
Right.
And the pattern, they call it there, what they call it there is administrative detention, okay? they take anybody they want, with or without charge, and they sequester them in places where family has no access to them. I'm thinking of a young student, a high school student, whose family we visited outside of Jericho, that was abducted, and she was abducted by the Israelis, by the Israeli authorities, simply because she was involved in a student council at her high school. And one of the things that, as the mother explained to us, that she was doing a lot of little local efforts to help the poorer students that she was in school with, getting school supplies together and distributing it to students at the beginning of the year. Well, that was recognized as subversive activity, and she was simply accosted, and I mean they came into the home and abducted her, and she was held for about 8 months. And released after I had returned. About a month later, she was released. But the Israeli government is claiming, and now, of course, the Trump administration is claiming the authority to simply take people without due process, and hold them indefinitely. And so, it's important to understand that this was not an arrest. This was an abduction.
So has there been a charge against Khalil to this point?
No, not that I'm aware of. And of course, Senator Rubio, his justification of that had to do with that his opinions, publicly expressed, are somehow a threat to national security, or potentially that. They don't even say it's a threat. They say it could potentially develop into one.
So are you suggesting, or do you have any evidence to suggest that Rubio and the American administration is borrowing a page from the Israelis?
I think that's absolutely what's happening.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say that Khalil's situation is administrative detention American style?
Absolutely. And I believe that that what they're trying to do is to see how much pushback there will be. Can they get away with it? Similar to, as I was trying to explain before, the kind of oppression that we're experiencing here through the criminalization of homelessness. We basically have a whole cross-section of people, poor people in this city that are not recognized by law or policy as having the status of personhood. And once you take people and put them in that status of non-personhood, then all bets are off. That's been our local experience here, and certainly I've been making that connection through visits to Palestine.
Okay.